If you want to talk prospects, I got just the man for you this evening. Bill Moriarty, editor-in-chief of A's Farm, today on Locked On A's.
You are Locked On A's, your daily podcast on the Athletics, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On A's, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your host, Booney. Thank you for making Locked On A's your first listen of the day. I'm from the Bay Area, and I've been a diehard A's fan since 1981. I'm here to bring you a real fan's take, covering everything from Oakland to Sacramento to Las Vegas. This is the place for A's fans to get the latest game breakdowns, team news, and more. This is where the passion of the fans take center stage. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. And please hit that subscribe button wherever you are following the show. Bill, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about the website, what you're doing exactly, how somebody actually qualifies to become a prospect, and your evaluation that goes into it for determining your top 10 and so forth.
Well, obviously there are certain limits. You can't have too much major league time or you're no longer a prospect. For the A's this year, Jacob Wilson still technically qualifies as a prospect, so he's still on our list and still considered a prospect by most. But it's no great mystery. There's a lot of players in the minor league system. A lot of people don't like to look at it this way, but a lot of them are kind of filler. You need to fill out these teams and these rosters. And most organizations, though they value all their players, don't look at most of these guys as true, legitimate major league prospects. And, only a small percentage of minor league players ever end up making it to the major leagues. Yeah. So, the key is identifying who are the guys who even have a remote shot. And, out of those guys, who do we want to focus on? I don't think this year, this offseason, there's a tremendous variance in most people's, top A's prospects lists. I think everybody across the board is fairly similar. There's a few little differences, who's a little higher, who's a little lower. I think usually the 10th spot, if you're doing top 10, is usually the hardest, who's going to get in under the wire. But I think, most people, probably there's 9 prospects on my top 10 list that are probably on most people's top 10 prospects list this offseason too. So I think it's pretty clear who the top guys are in the A's system. And what's kind of interesting about the A's prospects this year, their top prospects anyway, is that most of them are at the higher levels. A lot of times you'll have a lot of, younger guys and A-ball at the lower levels. But right now, the A's top prospects, the majority of them are, in AAA or AA. You have that's where the riches of the system are right now. You don't have a lot of higher ranked guys down in A-ball right now. So, there's the good and the bad of that. Of course, you'd like to have top prospects at all levels. But the good news is most of the A's top prospects are pretty close to getting their shot, at the major league level anyway. So I think that's something always exciting for people to see.
Depending on what transpires during the year. It seems like this year, and you tell me if I'm maybe just a little excited about the season coming up, but I can't remember, and you've obviously done this a lot longer than I have, I can't remember a prospect list up from top to bottom that you mentioned is so close together. And for me, it seems so talented. In your recent memory, do you remember a prospect list this hot?
Well, yeah, certainly, all you need are a couple of, really good looking, first round picks to really make things look a whole lot different. And that's been the case for the A's with Kurtz and Wilson. But I will say this, I think, the A's top prospects look better right now than they have in a good while. Baseball America, I think, ranked the A's farm system number 11 in
11,
this
yeah.
offseason. And, it hasn't been ranked that high. I don't remember the last time, certainly not in the last half dozen years have the A's been ranked that high by Baseball America. So, that's a good sign right there. I think, again, it just, it really came from the A's having, high picks in the first rounds the last couple of years. If you didn't have a Kurtz and a Wilson on the list, things would look a whole lot different. but fortunately, the A's do have a Kurtz and a Wilson on the list now. And, and then you've had guys, kind of break through, and put themselves in the running, guys like Colby Thomas and Henry Bolte and guys like that who really had good seasons and suddenly look like really legit prospects as well. So, yeah, I think it is in much better shape than it has been, in many of the recent years for the A's.
The only thing I was a little bit surprised on your list was Colby Thomas. I thought for sure he would be more in the top 5. Was there something about Thomas that you just like, hey, you didn't necessarily like?
Yeah, no knock on Colby Thomas. I have him listed number 9, and there are a lot of people's top 10 lists this year that didn't even have him in their top 10 at all. I don't think Fangraphs had him anywhere in the top 10. I think, look, Colby Thomas has tremendous power potential. He had 80 extra base hits last year, more than any other minor league player, period. So I mean, the guy has tremendous power potential without a doubt. I think the thing that holds me back and maybe held the A's back from taking a closer look at him last year as well is the strikeouts. And it's not just the strikeouts, but it's the tendency. He doesn't take a lot of walks as well. It's one thing if you're going to strike out, but you're willing to take a walk too. But the problem with Colby Thomas is he'll get deep into counts and then he'll swing at balls out of the zone instead of, taking a walk. And, you just can't get away with that as much in the major leagues. Once major league pitchers start seeing that you're willing to chase some, high fastball on a 3-2 count, that's what they're going to give you, and you're going to strike out. I think that's what scares people the most about Colby Thomas. And a lot of times when you see top prospects who don't translate to success at the major league level, it's the strikeouts, because they can have all the tools in the world, but if they have that one fatal flaw, major league pitchers are going to find out about it and they're going to exploit it, and I think that's what scares people a little bit about Colby Thomas. If he can just get a little more selective at the plate, show a little more discipline, he's got the power to, put the ball out of the park on any given pitch almost, So if he can just tighten that up and refine that, he's still got tremendous potential. And I think the only reason that I put Denzel Clark and Henry Bolte ahead of him, Henry Bolte and Colby Thomas are pretty similar players. They both got power. They both got speed. They both play pretty decent defense in the outfield. They both strike out a lot. Difference is Henry Bolte, for one, does take walks. Henry Bolte does have better speed. And also, Henry Bolte is 2.5 years younger than Colby Thomas.
That's a big deal.
Just one notch behind him on the organizational ladder. So, when you look at that, you say, okay, well, Colby Thomas still has a lot more room to grow, Henry Bolte has more room to grow. He's so much younger. And, Denzel Clark just has better speed than any of these guys, plays better defense in the outfield than any of these guys, and can play center field. Now, it's still a question whether Denzel Clark can put it all together. But if Denzel Clark can put it all together, then he's a real game changer as a center fielder, whereas Colby Thomas and Henry Bolte are more likely to be corner outfielders. Any of these guys could do it. They're still all pretty similar. They've got some power. They got some speed. They play decent defense. They strike out a lot. If any of these guys can just get more selective, lay off those pitches out of the zone, take their walks and wait for their pitches that they can really do real damage on, they could all break through. But if they can't learn to be more selective, they could have all the tools in the world and still not really succeed at the major league level.
I agree 100%. Out of all the prospects that I have heard mentioned the most from A's fans out there, is obviously number one is Kurtz. The other guy is Muncy. A lot of chatter about Muncy. The question I have on Muncy is he is more of a second baseman, shortstop. But right now with Wilson and Geloff filling those positions, everyone thinks he's going to slide into third base. Question is, can he play third base? And when do you think he may be ready? He was expected to play fall ball last year, but I believe was had a little bit of a nagging injury, and the A's decided to shut him down.
Yeah, Muncy had a hand injury last year, and even when he was playing, it was still kind of one of these nagging things. It just never kind of fully went away. So, he really only played, I think, about 50 games at AAA last year, but he hit really well. But I've had people in the A's organization tell me last year that if he had been healthy, he probably would have got a chance to make his major league debut with the A's last year.
Is that right?
They needed warm bodies who could play shortstop. They weren't planning on having Max Schumann playing shortstop for them last year.
Sure.
So Muncy, probably looked good enough to be given a shot last year if he was healthy. They were going to have him play third base in the instructional league. They were hoping, maybe get him into the Arizona Fall League, a little third base action. But when he was down at camp after the season, he still had some nagging things with the hand, and it was affecting other things. So they just said, you know what, just shut it down. Just don't do anything. Get better. And as far as I've been told, the plan is to have him play, a good bit of third base this year at Vegas. I assume he can play well. He's got a decent arm, so, he's got a decent arm at shortstop, so he ought to be able to make the throws from third. Sometimes with third, you just never know if guys' kind of reaction times are quick enough. Do they make the right move when it comes off the bat or not? But he's been a decent shortstop. He's got a good arm. He's fairly athletic. So I'm fairly confident he can adapt to it. And if he can just stay healthy and hit, it's not like there's anybody blocking him at this point. So, you would assume Gio Urshela is, he's a 1-year contract. He's an older guy. He's a short-term solution.
Sure.
If Muncy hits well, stays healthy in the first half, you'd assume, there's a good chance Urshela gets dealt at the deadline and Muncy comes up and gets his audition at third base. He certainly has the highest upside of any third base options we have in the minor leagues right now, whether it's Brett Harris or Darryl Hernandez. And there aren't a lot of other options down there. So, Muncy was a first-round pick. He's got some power. He's got some speed. He's got a good arm. He's very competitive. He plays hard. He's gotten a lot bigger and stronger since he was drafted. And every year he's been in the A's system, his numbers have gotten better. They've gone up every single year as he's gone through higher levels. So that's a good sign. And again, we don't really have any better options. So you'd like to think he's going to get a look at, at least by the second half and, see if it's something he's cut out for. And he'll certainly be seeing plenty of time at the hot corner in Vegas in the first part of the season. Sure. And we'll get a much better read on it then. But, if you just look in the A's system, I can't think of a better potential future option than Max Muncy right now.
Yeah, he seems to be a big favorite of a lot of people. The guy that I have been trying to get news on from last year and even this year that I've been just really struggling. Top international prospect, Luis Morales. How good is he? How good can he be? What's the ceiling for a guy like Luis Morales, and how soon do you think he'll be ready?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely a big question mark, but he, as you said, he really does have the best pure raw stuff of anyone in the system. He throws harder than anyone in the system. And in this day and age, that's enough to make you stand out, right? He throws harder than anybody. So right away, boom, you're near the top of the list. And he's got a really good slider now. He was kind of monkeying around with his breaking stuff, and it wasn't quite clear what was a curveball, what was a slider, what was this, what was that. But this last season, he's kind of gotten the slider, he's kind of gotten on top of the slider. He's now kind of mastered that a lot more. So he's got a nice slider with a real sweeping action. And, and his changeup isn't bad either. So he's got the stuff. It's just a matter of putting it all together. His command has been very spotty. And, in his starts for Lansing, he could make guys look really foolish at the plate at times, but he would throw a lot of pitches. He'd go deep into counts. He rarely, went more than 4 innings, and it starts down there. And that just goes to command. It's just he's throwing too many pitches because he can't really command them. He doesn't know where they're going, So the question with him, he's got the stuff. It's raw. It's there, but can he put it together? Excuse me. Can he command it and make it go where he wants it to go? this coming season in Midland is obviously going to be a big test for him. I mean, we're assuming he'll be a double A Midland. He'll be facing double A hitters, which are a lot more advanced than the A ball hitters. And, if he can command his stuff, he won't have that much trouble against them. But if he can't command his stuff, they're going to take advantage of of his wildness and his mistakes that he makes. So this is going to be a big test for him. If he can put it together this year at double A Midland, then he ain't going to be far away, But
Yeah, no, I bet.
if he's
Especially
still
with the A's
struggling
being-
at Midland, it's going to take a little while for him to get to the major league. So we'll see. But he's got bigger upside than anybody down there.
How about Jack Perkins, Bill? What's your thoughts on him? Seems like he had a huge second half last year. Was really impressive.
Yeah, both he and Mason Barnett, I've got at 5 and 6 on my top 10 prospects list, just behind Luis Morales, because both those guys looked dominant when they were pitching at Midland last year. Both of them, they throw hard. They've both got either a good slider or sweeper. They've got some other good secondary pitches, and they both just had tremendous second halves at Midland. And from what I understand, the people in the A's front office pretty much look at those two guys as the pitching prospects that are poised to break on through to the major league pitching picture sooner rather than later. So I think there's a lot of optimism about those two pitchers. I think Barnett just came over from the Royals, so the A's are really kind of getting their first up close looks at him, really. But they really wanted to get him. They had high hopes when they reacquired him in the Lucas Ursig deal with the Royals.
Yeah.
And Perkins, since he's been drafted, whenever he's been healthy, he's pitched well. He's had some injury issues, and he can struggle with his control a little bit at times, but not it's not terrible, So, yeah. But both of them have really good stuff, and they seem to know how to pitch. So I think those are two guys to keep your eyes on, whether they start the season in the AAA rotation, or they still might start the season in the Midland rotation and then move on up to AAA once the season gets going. But either way, I think those are two guys to keep your eyes on as being the next, starting pitchers to potentially make a mark in the major leagues for the A's, with, Luis Morales being a little bit behind him. And then just depending on what he does at Midland this year, determining just how far behind him he is.
Today's episode is brought to you in part by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you, unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. The fact is that Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein, providing all 9 essential amino acids. How these little green wonders pack a protein punch. No shells, Wonderful Pistachios for that grab and go ease. The satisfying crack of opening each shell, it's like snack meditation. Whether you are running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. The man, the myth, Nick Kurtz. How good is he?
Yeah, it's as I said in my write-up of him on my prospects list on athleticsfarm.com, there's just there's so much to like about him. I mean, there's almost nothing not to like about Nick Kurtz. I mean, he makes contact, he hits for power, he takes walks, gets on base, doesn't strike out much, I mean, at all, particularly for a power hitter, and he plays good defense at first base. So, I mean, maybe he's not going to be a base stealer, but that's about the only, negative you could say about him. And with everything else he's got going for him, you don't need him to steal bases. So, I mean, he's the real deal, and I think it's entirely possible that if the A's had the first overall pick in the draft last year, they might have went with Kurtz.
Is that right?
Anyway, yeah, there was certainly they were talking about that from the beginning, and they were that high on him from the beginning, So again, when you just look at him, there just aren't really any major flaws in his game. So with a guy like Nick Kurtz, all you got to do is just hope he stays healthy. He had the hamstring issue that cost him, time last year. But then when he came back in the Arizona Fall League too, he just picked up where he left off and just kept hitting. So, much like Jacob Wilson did, he just hit the ground running right away. But unlike Jacob Wilson, Nick Kurtz also has the power, and that makes a huge difference. So as long as he stays healthy, Nick Kurtz will be here sooner rather than later. I'd assume, 2026. I mean, you never know till the guy, gets out on the field and starts playing. Anything could happen, but there just are so few holes in his game that you've got to assume that he's going to be a very fast mover, and that's exciting. I know people are like, oh well, there's Tyler Soderstrom, there's this, there's that. That's not a bad problem to have. If Nick Kurtz comes on strong and fast, they'll figure it out. They'll do something. So we'll see. It'll be exciting. I'm assuming he starts playing first base at Midland this spring, and hopefully all goes well. He'll be in Vegas, by the second half, and maybe we'll get a look at him by the end of the year. But I think I can't think of a prospect that it's been easier to be genuinely excited about with less reservations than Nick Kurtz.
You got Daniel Susac as number 10. Can he be a star? What do you think of Susac?
Yeah, I mean, Susac, you have to remember, he was a first round draft pick. There's a reason for that. I think he's a bit of a mystery still. It's going to be determined how good he can be. There have been seasons where he's hit over 300 in the minors. There have been times when he's shown some real power, and the A's believe there is more power potential in him still to be tapped. And again, he's not a great catcher, but he's not a bad catcher either. He's got a pretty strong arm. And there isn't that much really great catching talent in the major leagues at this point.
No,
if you look around, it doesn't take much to be a catcher in the major leagues. And I think he certainly has the potential to be a usable, workable backup catcher in the major leagues. I think that that's pretty easy to imagine. The question is, does he put it all together enough to be a legitimate starting catcher? And that's still to be determined. I mean, he wasn't drafted that long ago. He's going to probably, see time in AAA this year. And, that'll be a good test. Can he put that power potential, that ability to make contact together on a consistent basis? He's been a little streaky, but in a short look in the Arizona Fall League last fall, he looked really good. He hit really well, and he was hitting for a little more power there too. So, if he can he can hit 300 in the minor leagues anyway. He can hit home runs. He has in the minor leagues anyway.
Denzel Clark. How
Denzel
good is
Clark.
he defensively?
He's very good defensively. I mean, he can, he's still a little raw, but he has really great speed in center field, and he has pretty good instincts out there, and he's got a pretty good arm. So, he'll make most of the routine plays, and then he'll run down balls you didn't think he had any chance of getting at, which how great that is to see in a center fielder. That's always fun, but besides being fun, it's also really helpful, and he's really fast. He's got really long legs, and he could just get to so many balls in center field. And then he's got a strong enough arm to do the job out there too. So, I when you look around the A's system, I just don't see any really exciting center fielders who can also do a lot of damage at the plate, and you just don't see a lot of those guys even in the big leagues anymore.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of Andre Dawsons around these
No,
days.
sure.
I mean, you often see, good center fielders who are kind of light hitting guys, but
built differently. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
yeah, that's why I say that Denzel Clark, if he can put it together, he has the opportunity to be such a difference maker. I mean, if you just imagine having, a center fielder who can play that position, who can run down balls and then can show power at the plate, speed on the bases, that's a kind of game-changing talent. You put that guy putting his tools together in the middle of the A's lineup, and they are suddenly a playoff contending team. Right now, if you had Denzel Clark at full potential, maximized in the middle of the A's lineup, that's an entirely different team. So that's why we should all be, saying a prayer every night for Denzel Clark, realizing his true potential, because there is no one who maxing out their potential will do more to make the A's a successful, exciting team than Denzel Clark could. So I'm really, really hoping that he's able to put it together this year in AAA. And certainly the way the ball flies out of the ballpark in Vegas, it ought to be fun to watch him there anyway. So then just hopefully it will translate to the major leagues too. But yeah, that's why Denzel Clark is 3 on my list, because he's just the kind of guy, if he does put it together, he just makes more difference than almost anybody on the list, save perhaps Nick Kurtz.
Yeah, right. Who is a player, not necessarily on the 60-man or 40-man or whatever, that's a sleeper out there that A's fans should keep an eye on? Maybe somebody you just like that, like, hey, he has something.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. Most of the guys worth looking at are at the higher levels of the system right now. And I was just sort of going through and looking at how I thought the lower Stockton Lansing rosters were going to, look this year. And, I was like, it's not that many guys to get excited about that. But but I will mention a few people. A guy that's kind of overlooked anyway is Brennan Malone, who was, really one of the best hitters at Midland, the most productive hitters at Midland last year. He's played first, he's played third, he's played second. Everywhere he's played since he's been in the A system, he's hit, and he has kind of an orthodox look at the plate, but the guy has hit everywhere he's been. And he's just kind of an under the radar guy that I think if given an opportunity, he could be kind of a guy like Max Schumann, who just kind of when they get the opportunity, floats to the top and serves a role. But below that, it's going to be the guys who were in the draft last year. You're probably going to have Tommy White, who you mentioned at Lansing. You're probably going to have shortstop Josh Kuroda-Grauer, who looks pretty good. He could be an interesting guy to keep an eye on too. He'll probably be down there at Lansing as well. And I think Rodney Green, who was a center fielder the A's took last year too, he probably looked better at Stockton than any of last year's draftees that were assigned to Stockton. Again, he's got power and speed. He's got some tools, and I'm assuming that he'll be at Lansing again this year as well. So, I think those guys from last year's draft who are likely to be at High A Lansing are probably all worth keeping an eye on and seeing who can really, make their mark there, because those guys were all reasonably high draft picks who, if they can perform well in High A, could move fast.
With the exception of Jacob Wilson, who is most likely, now this is tough, I think probably it would be Barnett, have the chance to make the opening day 26-man roster. Would it be Barnett, or is there anybody you like that has the best chance? I know how hard it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I know people like spring battles. I don't think there's going to be a lot of spring battles in the A's camp this year. They pretty much have the position player roster set if everyone's healthy. And on the pitching side, the real battle's probably just going to be for the 5th starter spot and maybe the final spot or two in the bullpen. But on the position player side, they pretty much know where they're going and what they're doing, and there aren't going to be any rookies besides Jacob Wilson, who's technically a rookie, breaking through. I think the most likely guys that will come through at some point or have a chance to come through if there are injuries, maybe in spring or early in the season, would be either Max Muncy or Colby Thomas. First of all, those two guys have at least each had half of a good season at AAA,
Right.
that puts them next in line. But, neither one are on the 40-man roster. So that's an
That makes
impediment
it
there.
so hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, so I think the only way either of those guys would have a remote chance of beginning the season on the big league roster is if you had a wave of injuries, if you had a couple of outfielders, go on the IL, maybe Seth Brown and Miguel Andujar or something, that could open a door for Colby Thomas and left. But I think you'd have to have something happen like that. And, the only way to open a door for Max Muncy to start the season, if maybe Gio Urshela goes on the IL and Max Muncy has a great spring. But I think, the A's finished the season pretty much knowing what their core was and what they wanted it to be. And then we're just going to spend the offseason going in and getting those remaining pieces to fill it in, and they didn't want to go into spring with a lot of mystery, like in the last couple of years as to who was going to be on the big league rosters. So I think they're pretty set, but I think what we really, aside from injuries potentially occurring and opening the door, I think what we really have to look for is who's going to come up in the second half, and I think there again, it's Colby Thomas, Max Muncy, the most likely. If Denzel Clark has a great first half in Vegas, he could be there too. And pitching wise, there's so many guys. I mean, you're probably either going to, whoever doesn't make the A's major league roster, you're going to have JT Ginn or Joey Estes at Vegas. You're probably going to have Brady Basso, Hogan Harris, Gunnar Hoglund. I mean, there's going to be a lot of these guys whose names you're familiar with there, who would probably be, the first up if somebody was needed. Again, a lot of them are on the 40-man roster to begin with.
Sure.
But once Jack Perkins and Mason Barnett get to Vegas, if they're still looking good there, then those guys could be next too. But I think if they need fill-ins in the first half anyway, it's going to be those familiar names you've seen before that are on the 40-man that are going to come up. And then maybe we see some of these guys, your Max Muncy's, your Colby Thomas, your Denzel Clarks, your Jack Perkins, your Mason Barnett's, maybe in the second half. And again, a lot of that has to do with injuries. If the major league team is healthy, you're not going to see those guys quite so soon, but if there are, sometimes you got a wave of injuries and you just start calling up every warm body that's been playing reasonably well. And, that can happen too. So I think, those guys are the ones, kind of on the precipice that you just have to wait and see how things pan out. But those are certainly the closest ones.
Last question. What's your thoughts on the A's this year? What do you think they're going to end up finishing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, they made such a big step forward last year, which was great to see. And again, so much of this comes down to health. So much of it comes down to health. And I just posted on X today that, perhaps the biggest determinant of whether the A's win 70-something games this year or 80-something games this year is the health of Luis Severino and Jeffrey Springs. These are two good pitchers, but they've had a lot of injury issues over their careers. Severino, in the last 6 years, has only had 2 seasons where he threw more than 100 innings. And Jeffrey Springs has only had 1 season in his entire major league career where he threw over 100 innings. So that's really something to think about. If those guys can each go out and make 30 starts, the A's are going to be an 80-something win team, I think,
I agree.
But if those guys maybe each make about 15 starts, and they only pitch for about half the season, they're probably going to be a 70-something win team. I think the goal for this year, I know a lot of people are thinking, playoff contention. I think, you had 69 wins last year. That was a big improvement. To me, 2025 is about getting to 500, just getting to 500. And then the next season, you're ready to take the next step. If the A's can get even close to playoff contention this year, that's great. That's a great season. If they could get anywhere near 85 wins, that's a great season. If they fall short of 500, that's a bit of a disappointment to me, but as long as they're reasonably in the realm of 500, I think A's fans should be happy. You got to remember where we were just 2 years ago, and if you could be at 500 this season, that's a lot of progress, and they've got the core. They're young. That if you get to 500 this year, you are definitely in a great position to move up into playoff contention in the following season, A lot of these guys are still young. They're still learning, but they are talented. They've got a good core, and they've got more talented guys on the way. So, um, again, 500 is it makes me happy. That's a good goal. Any better than that, we can really celebrate. Any worse than that, then maybe we've had a little bad luck. Uh, but I think 2026, there's no reason if they play their cards right that they shouldn't be a legitimate playoff contending team. Which is the goal, and which would be great to see again, because nobody ever expects anything from the A's, and they expect even less from the A's now. So it's always a joy when the A's can come back and shove it in people's face and show them how to win even on a budget. And that's been the A's moniker for much of their existence. So I think they might not be poised to be that playoff contending team quite this year. They are great, but if not, then certainly by 2026, because they've got a great group of core young players and even more on the way. And so people should be excited about this coming season,
for sure.
Regardless of what one's expectations are.
I think you nailed it, though. I think if Severino and Springs stay healthy, and with the AL West being down the way it is, who knows? I think they have a shot, but that's a big if. Those two staying healthy. That's a big
exactly. I mean, they're very talented pitchers, and if they're healthy, man, they can be real difference makers. Sure. But there's a reason they've become available to the A's, because they haven't been able to be consistently healthy. And when you look at almost any major league team, that's the one thing people overlook so often. The difference is health. It's just, do your guys stay healthy? If you keep having to dredge up guys from AAA all season long, that's not the team you plan to be winning with. So let's just hope everybody's healthy this season. They've certainly got a lot more talent this season to put on the field, as long as guys stay on the field. So let's hope that's the case, and we can see the A's max out their potential in 2025 anyway.
100%. Bill, hey, it's been a pleasure, man. I really want to thank you for your time. Your insight was incredible. Again, love your website and what you're doing with it, and just think the work you're doing just gives a lot of insight on what I think is one of the most entertaining things about the A's is their prospects and how they grow these guys and what they become. So really want to appreciate your time.
Yeah, well, it's a great time to pay attention to the prospects down on the farm, because this is what's going to make this next winning A's team. So if people want to keep an eye on it, you can always find my website, athleticsfarm.com. You can find me on X at athleticsfarm. And I hope you'll keep doing what you're doing and waving the A's flag and getting people excited for what's to come too.
I appreciate it, Bill. Thank you, sir. Thank you for making Locked On A's your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the off season. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast.